Welcome back, independent thinkers, as Hillary Clinton has put herself in another huge bind along with Barack Hussein Obama and the rest of the corrupt bureaucrats that tried to commit a coup against Donald Trump, your duly elected president. This goes all the way back to 2016 with Russia, as they all lied to you, the American voters, and they told you that Russia was trying to interfere in our elections. This was a blatant lie. They knew it back then, and they still ran with it for years. And finally, after all these years, the truth is finally coming out. The problem is that lies spread faster than the truth quite often. And especially when you have corrupt bureaucrats in position of power, then you have their friends over in the fake news networks, whether it be MSNBC, CNN, ABC, NBC, New York Times, LA Times, Washington Post, Political Axios. Every single one of them were in the bag for the Democrats. They were all Team DNC. And they were more than happy to lie for the deep state to help Hillary Clinton try to usurp what you, the American people, voted for, Donald Trump, as your president. And they try to do it again in 2025. But finally, the proof is finally coming out, what we knew the entire time. As tonight's show is going to be very meaty, getting into all the weeds and how this all plays out, how they knew that they were lying, is now that we have the declassified evidence. And then, speaking of classified for a minute, far too often classification isn't used the way that it's supposed to be. You see, classification is not supposed to be used to either cover up corruption or cover up incompetence. Yet very often that's exactly what happens. And that's exactly what happened here in Russia, all these years later. The very important date to remember is December 8th. And why that date is so important, now that we have all the declassified information, is because that is the day when Obama's intelligence agents, they said that Russia didn't have the means or the desire to interfere with our elections. Just give that a thought for a moment. They knew on December 8th that Russia was a hoax. How many of you knew that? Probably none, because they lied for years about it. And the next day on December 9th, that is when the order was given to make up the fake intel that led to Russia hoax, that led to the Steele dossier, and that led to Crossfire Hurricane, that led to the legal prosecutions of the Donald Trump administration. Now, before we get into all of the details of how all this happened, first need to explain how the deep state works. You see, the deep state was created to essentially give the public, the people that we vote into office, to give them cover. You see, for them, they can actually be voted out and they can lose elections. And there's nothing that a politician is more scared of than losing their power. Thus, the growth of the deep state. And these are these unelected officials. You don't know who they are. You could walk right by them in a grocery store and they just look like a normal person. But they have tremendous amounts of power over your life as they run all the alphabet soup of the federal government. Whether you have all the intelligence agents that we'll cover over now, as you have the FBI, as you have the DOJ and the CIA, and all the other agencies that all work together to undermine this president of the United States. Now, I call this blob, I call it the three-headed beast from the DC abyss, because it essentially operates off three heads. You have the first head, this is the deep state that we were just talking about, that these are the ones that actually run Washington, D.C., because the politicians are cowards. These are the people who actually write the laws and then hand them off to Congress. Congress pretends they're doing something, they sign them off, and then they go back on to vacation, whatever they're not doing, sitting in Congress, what they should be doing. That is the exact opposite of what our Constitution has said that we are supposed to do. So your elected officials, they're supposed to represent you, not the deep state. You vote for them, they go into Congress, and then they create the laws. This is why it was so huge when SCOTUS, when they overruled Chevron indifference and started telling the elected officials that, you need to do your job. Enough is enough. All right. The IRS, the DOJ, the FBI, the OSHA, just start going down the list. The IRS, all of them, are never supposed to have the authority to write laws. Now, that's exclusive for Congress. And that is what's led to so much corruption, because these people, they're so just arrogant. Right? They think that they have the right to rule over you. See, they're smarter than you. They have Ivy League degrees, right? They have all the initials in front of their names. They have fancy titles. They have the big fancy government buildings with the badges, and then they get to meet with all the Congress and all the House, and they get to meet with all the movers and shakers, right? They're very, very important people. And their work is very, very, very important. Way more important than you, because they're smarter than you and they're better than you. They truly 100% believe that. They think that you, the American people, are in the way. I mean, they shouldn't even have to have elections. I mean, that's what their Ivy League degrees were for, is to prove just how smart they were. And you dared to do something that should never, ever be done. You voted for Donald J. Trump, not once, but twice. And this has blown their minds, as they told you, the boxes hoaxes, and they told you Gene Carroll, and they told you how the Russia, and then they told you how impeachment 1 and impeachment 2, and then there was a January 6th hoax, and one hoax after another from these deep state experts to try to frame Donald Trump for a crime he did not commit. The one we're focusing on tonight is Russia. So that is the first head, is the deep state. These are the unelected bureaucrats that think they have the right to rule over you. Then the next head of the deep state is the mainstream media, the corporate media. Is this be MSNBC, CNN, ABC, New York Times, LA Times, Political Axios, all the big corporate media that you all know. And they all pretend that they're journalists, but there is not a single journalistic bone in their body, as they're more than happy to lie for the deep state and lie to the American people, because just like the deep state, they think that they are elite. I mean, they're paid millions and millions of dollars. They're high above you in the lofty ivory towers. They have fancy Ivy League degrees, right? They live the best life. And this certain amount of celebrity to them, it gives them this arrogance, right? You can just tell it when you talk to the liberal elite. They just have this certain just smugness about them, right? The slime that comes off them. And when they go and they lie to you through the deep state, they'll do it through two ways. They'll lose experts say, or scientists say, are their two favorites, or a source tells us. Okay, I want to be clear. There was never a source. There was never an expert. Almost every single time they make it up. Right? So the first head, the deep state, feeds what they want to the mainstream media. Then the mainstream media runs with whatever the deep state wants them to run with. Sources and experts. And then all the news agencies, they all run with it at the exact same time, like a cartel. And then all of a sudden this little story looks like it's a huge big deal. And then that goes up to the third head, the politicians, the ones that are cowards that don't actually want to take any risk, that are more than happy to give everything back to the first head of the deep state. And they'll say, if anything comes back on them, don't talk to me. Go talk to the IRS. Go talk to OSHA. They're the ones that are making this rule, not me. So see how that insulates them until it comes back from the deep state, back to the mainstream media, and then now back up to the politicians. And then they will run with whatever all the fake news runs, right? You'll see them quote them all the time. You know what? New York Times says, Washington Post says, CNN says. So it looks like this huge story, but it's really just a mirage. Then once they get all that information out, then it goes back down to the deep state again. And the deep state says, well, the mainstream media is reporting this. All the uniparty is declaring that we must open up investigations. So then like the FBI and the DOJ are more than happy to open up investigations based on the leaks that they themselves made up. And that's what we're going to walk through tonight with Russia. So let's do a real quick of how that operation works, specifically on Russia. And then we'll go through and we'll talk about all the individual pieces of this and how it all came together. So it starts with the deep state leaks. Remember I said at the beginning of the show, December 8th is the very important date. Because December 8th is the day when the intelligence, they knew that Russia was a hoax. Their own intelligence apparatus said they didn't have the means and they didn't have the ability to do so. But on December 9th, that's when the fake one came out. That's when the one where they made up Russia, and they used this with Obama, with Hillary Clinton, Clapper, Comey, Brennan. They were all in on it. So they wrote a fake document. And then this fake document, remember, this is the deep state, right? This is the first head from the DC abyss. And then it goes to the second head from the DC abyss, the media. Now, the media uses experts saying, sources say, right? So then they go for 2 years of hell. Russia. Donald Trump, is Russian asset. He is Putin's puppet. They all knew it was a lie. They all could have unraveled it if they had a single journalistic bone in their entire bodies, but they don't have a single one. And that went right back up to the Democrats, the third head, and they started running with all the fake news hoax over and over and over again, just like the mainstream media does, puppeting the exact same talking points. Then it goes back down to the deep state, and the deep state uses the information that they leaked to the mainstream media as cover, because now the mainstream media is covering, as sources say, and Democrats are demanding investigations. And so all of a sudden, this deep state is very interested in the story that they made up themselves. Thus comes the FBI and the DOJ with Crossfire Hurricane, going off after the Steele dossier and these fake intelligence to frame Donald Trump for a crime he did not commit. So what was the real crime that Donald Trump committed? What was so bad? He defeated Hillary Clinton. That's Donald Trump's crime. That is the one thing that he did wrong. You see, Hillary Clinton was supposed to win in 2016. I mean, she was so just grateful that it was her opportunity. I mean, she thought it was supposed to be back in 2008 and 2012. But then the Democrat Party decided, no, we're going to bring in Barack Hussein Obama. And she was forced to step back. But now, in 2016, it was her turn to rule, to be the liberal elite. And all the same apparatus, the three-headed from the DC abyss, they all ran the same hoaxes in that entire time for Hillary Clinton, running cover for her and then trying to destroy Donald Trump. But the one thing that was more different than anything else in 2016 was social media was finally starting to take off. And the control that the mainstream media had over the influence, because they controlled all the information, was slowly going away. And it, as we know from history, it didn't work. Even though Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the next one. And she was given a 2% chance of winning that night. They all believed their own lies. And they were all shocked when it didn't go the way that they thought it was going to go. I mean, I still go back every once in a while, and you can go on YouTube and you can watch the fake news meltdowns as they started to realize that Hillary Clinton was going to lose. And I still love the look on Jake Tapper's face when he's staring at the screen, trying to look for a path for Hillary Clinton to be back in president, and realizing that was never, ever going to happen. That look will forever be in my brain. That sums up the deep state perfectly. So that happened, and then she, like the rest of them, they thought that they had been cheated. But of course, they didn't cheat, they just lost. But in their liberal minds, for this Marxist ideology, is Marxism always starts with the end. And then you build up from the end backwards to whatever conclusion you want to come to. Okay, this is going to be very important because this is how the Democrats, how they operated for a very long time. They tried to do it in 2016. They try to do it in every single election cycle, all the way now to 2024 and then into 2025. So remember this, because this is also very important, is Marxism. It starts with equity, not equality, meaning they decide that they are right and that they just decide magically that they are morally superior based on their own fallacy. And then once they decide that they are right, and that once they decide that they are born to rule over you, well, then anything that goes against that, then that person must be bad because they're good. And so they must be a racist or a bigot or a homophobe or a transphobe or a white nationalist, an extreme MAGA Republican. See, everything that they need to do just to try to silence you and to shut you up. to just give up and give them the power. The ones who are born to rule over you. And the biggest threat to this DC abyss, the deep state, where I call the three-headed abyss, the three-headed monster from the DC abyss, is a billionaire populace. It's the biggest thing that the New World Order is scared to death of rising, because they're the biggest threat to their permanent rule over you. The Democrats, they truly believe they were never going to lose another election. They really thought that it was going to be Barack Hussein Obama, and then on 8 years of Hillary Clinton, and then whoever came after that. It was just going to be, there's still going to be a Republican Party. Even in like Stalin in his Russia, there's still an opposing party back then. But the opposing party didn't have any real power. I mean, they can make some noise and they can do some little things, but they couldn't affect anything that really matters. And that's the same model that the Democrats were going after. Well, they had Hillary right after Barack Hussein Obama. They had all the media, they had all the Hollywood, right? And they had billions of dollars backing them. I mean, they had everything going for them, except no one liked Hillary Clinton and everyone liked Donald Trump. And that popped the bubble that can never be popped. Now, on to the Marxism, right? Because they are right. They are born to rule. And so they start there. And then they work backwards to try to find something that Donald Trump did, because Donald Trump shouldn't be able to beat Hillary Clinton. And they told themselves that for the full year. But they couldn't find anything. And so then they made up, well, let's look up Russia. Right? Russia must have gone after our elections. And so they investigated. Remember, Donald Trump won in November. December 8th, the report comes out internally. It says Russia didn't have the ability or the intent to interfere in our elections. Marxism, merit. Instead, they use equity, meaning they have to go to the end. And that didn't fit their narrative, right? Because it had to be Donald Trump couldn't have beat Hillary Clinton. It has to be that the Russia interfered in our elections. But this report says that it didn't. So what do when facts don't fit the narrative? Is they make the facts disappear. And that is exactly what happened. They were going to get the narrative through one way or another. Thus, Russia was born December 9th. And now we're seeing why they classified all of this stuff. Because that December 8th report, that was supposed to be in the White House briefing. And at this time, Donald Trump had access to these briefings, meaning he would have known about this report. But it never made it in. It was pulled. And then you know the rest of the story and the deep state, right? Russia, and we know what happened from there for years. So that's the overarching Russia hoax. Now we're going to get into the details of how all this happened. And I just look at the clock. I'm realizing I'm up against a break, and I don't want to stop in the middle of this next part. So we're going to take this greedy profit break. And then when we come back, we're going to get into the weeds of all the stuff that happened with Russia, how they used the intelligence agencies and how they used the FBI and the DOJ and the mainstream media to lie to you, the American people, and put you through 2 years of hell when they knew Russia was a hoax. We'll be back talking about that and a whole lot more. You won't want to miss it. This is the CASHLOREN Show. Well, we're going through the Russia hoax. Now that this is being the deep state through Hillary Clinton and Barack Hussein Obama tried to frame Donald Trump for a crime that they knew he didn't commit. And all these documents that are now coming out, thanks to Patel and the FBI, releasing them over, and then Tulsi Gabbard also releasing her information, we now have all the pieces that many knew for this entire time. That Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton made up Russia to frame the duly elected president for a crime that he did not commit. All because they couldn't stand that they lost the election that they thought they were due to win. On the other side of this now is how they created all this information. And we're going to go through all this through the details of it now, as through the deep state, meaning these unelected officials. This be Brennan, in this case, this be Comey, and this be Clapper, be the main ones. And then all the friends in the mainstream media, you know them all, MSNBC, CNN, ABC, and then up to the politicians who ran with Russia for years, and then back down to the deep state, as the FBI and the DOJ, they use this as cover to open up Crossfire Hurricane when they knew from the very beginning it was all a lie because they made it up. The start of this is in December 8th. Okay, this is the very important date. The most important date out of all of what happens as we go through with Russia. Why is December 8th so important? Because on December 8th, this is when the intelligence agency, and remember, this is after Donald Trump had won in 2016, but before he took office. All right, so they knew Russia's a hoax on December 8th because they went and they dug up every single hole in his own intelligence agencies. This being Barack Hussein Obama's said Russia didn't have the intent or the ability to interfere in our elections. There goes Putin's puppet. There goes Russia. It all goes down the hole. But Hillary Clinton and Barack Hussein Obama couldn't accept that. So they made up Russia. They said, fine, you know what? If Russia, they didn't interfere in our elections, we'll just make it up and say they did anyways. Because we are the liberal elite. We are born to rule over you. Thus, from December 8th, that report that proved Donald Trump was not affected by Russia was pulled from the White House briefings. And that report, because Donald Trump had already won the election, he would have seen it, but it wasn't in the White House binder. On December 9th, the next most important date is when they swapped out the one that said that Trump wasn't part of Russia. They swapped in the one that said he probably was. And then Russia grew from there, went on to the Steele dossier and on to Crossfire Hurricane and all the years of hell and the billions of dollars wasted. Now there is even more coming out today. So this is the Trump administration when they have released the Durham Annex. And this starts into these burn bags that are found in the secret room of the FBI. These burn bags, let's cover what they are really quick. They're exactly what they sound like, except they're made for high security, like classified documents that need to be destroyed. And so they're thicker, they're more intense. They're usually like, they can be read a lot of the times. And then they will get sealed, and then they will be put in like special places. And there's a strict chain of custody because these usually carry like classified documents or top secret documents. And I want to be clear about this part. This is perfectly normal. This happens every single day, all the time. The act of sealing documents inside these burn bags in itself is not a crime. No more than Joe Biden in his auto pin is a crime. Okay, just like the auto pin, these burn bags are not the crime. The crime is the intent behind them. Just like with the auto pin with Joe Biden, when he probably had no idea what he was doing, and it looks like his White House aides were using the pen without his full authorization. This is the same thing here, as now they were using this, what is actually routine and normal for these burn bags, except they were using it to hide crimes and hide, it looks like possibly seditious conspiracy, maybe all the way up to treason. And we'll get into a lot of that and why. So this is from FBI. And one of the questions that I have is, if they already had them in these bags and they already had them supposedly like this back room, why did they not destroy them? I can only think of maybe one or two really good reasons why. One, I would imagine that they were so overloaded because they didn't think that Donald Trump could win. Just like in 2016, they also convinced themselves that Kamala Harris is going to win in 2024. So I think part suspiciously in this is they had a very small window and they had to pick and choose. And so I think what happened, and this is just me guessing, but I think they just ran out of time. And so they stashed what they couldn't get destroyed. I think they focused on Epstein, and we've been covering that a lot lately, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But this is important. So this is the burn bags. This is the secret room. This is all the documents they found. And this is all the documents also when Tulsi Gabbard released earlier in the last week, these are all the ones that show that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, they ordered all this to happen. Now, why is this all so important? It's because they knew it was a hoax. That means when they leaked all this to the mainstream media, they knew this was a hoax. Okay, then when the Democrats ran with it, and then when it went back to the FBI for Crossfire Hurricane, and they put Donald Trump and his administration through years of hell, they knew it was all made up. And then they also used this to get FISA warrants. And something like FISA, this is just like most probably CIA, is they're not supposed to operate here on U.S. soil. This is supposed to be foreign warrants. But the deep state, they did a deep state trick. What they do is they say, well, if you're operating for a foreign agency like Russia magically, then all of a sudden, can't we get FISA warrants on US citizens if they're being a foreign operative? Of course, who decides that? The corrupt deep state, of course. And then they took these to these FISA judges, but then they did something that was even worse. Is when they took it to these FISA judges to get these warrants, like on here on the Trump's administration, they hid the facts of the Steele dossier from these judges. And just like they do in the mainstream media in the deep state, where they only tell you the parts that they want you to know, they did the same thing to these judges. They presented the information to get the warrants, but they left out the parts that that the judges would have known. It's very likely they never would have gotten the FISA warrants. More and more corruption. And then in addition to this, okay, so this is James Comey, or excuse me, this is not James Comey. This is Steve Brennan, John Brennan. Let me get my names right. Is he lied to Congress? And out of all these corrupt officials that get thrown into prison, the hardest is probably Barack Hussein Obama, because you have to argue presidential immunity, as SCOTUS ruled 4 official acts while you're president. But let's be clear about Barack Hussein Obama. If he did something that was not an official act, he can be prosecuted even if he is president. And then anything he did after presidency is fair game. But this isn't as easy as it sounds, because SCOTUS also intentionally, they left it very, very vague. So this would have, I mean, if you could even arrest him, you even get judges to go through with it. Out of all of them, that's why Barack Hussein Obama, because of presidential immunity, is the hardest to get. But the easiest and probably the lowest hanging fruit is John Brennan. Why? Because he lied to Congress. So now these documents have been released. You can prove that he lied to Congress, that he committed perjury, and perjury is a crime that you can be thrown in prison for. 2 sides of it, right? They have to lie and they have to know they lie. But with these documents, I think they can get there, and they can maybe even get to seditious conspiracy or possibly treason as we go through all these facts. And because it was under Brennan's instruction from Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton to run the op for Russia. And now Brennan, he is still running the same cover that he did back then that he does now. And then we're going to play this clip from Brennan. And I want to listen to how nervous he sounds as he goes on the very friendly MSNBC, who happens to have no influence left, and tries to pretend that everything was on the up and up when they did to Donald Trump. When he knows, and now we know, and even MSN knows, but the reason that they can't, he can only go to places like MSNBC is because they will let him lie. So listen to how nervous John Brennan sounds, as I think he is the easiest of them to arrest and prosecute.
Very political, partisan path in terms of defending Donald Trump.
The Trump administration says it's created what they call a strike force to investigate here. What are your concerns about that? Are you worried?
A strike force, meaning to the DOJ and the FBI to investigate these criminals, alleged criminals, to bring about charges to arrest and prosecute. And John Brennan is just terrified of what can happen to him because he is the easiest. So watch how he tries to run cover for himself.
Well, if the director of CIA and the director of national intelligence make referrals to the Department of Justice, I think the Department of Justice has to do something to respond to it. So putting together an internal strike force, whatever, to take a look at this information is certainly, I think, understandable. But also, I'd like to think that professionals in the Department of Justice will dismiss any of these referrals because they're baseless. They really are. So again, I stand.
Let's cover that part here real quick. See, this is the way that the deep state works. If you want to see how the deep state works, this is it. You'll never get a better view than how corrupt our system is right now. What is John Brennan calling for right there? You see how he talks in code? Yeah, you can open an investigation because they open investigations all the time. I mean, they opened an investigation into Hillary Clinton and nothing came of it. Right? If you're on the right side of the deep state, if you're on the Democrat side, what we call the 2-tier justice system, then you have nothing to worry about. Right? I mean, sure, they might open an investigation. They might ask you a couple uncomfortable conversation. They might have a couple questions, but it'll never, ever go anywhere, right? Just like what Comey did way back then. No reasonable prosecutor would bring this case, meaning against Hillary Clinton. Wow, that sure is convenient. I don't know how the FBI gets to make that decision. I think that was something that Comey just made up in his own head. But of course, they were not going to go after Hillary Clinton. And Donald Trump at the time, he said, I don't know about throwing a president's wife in prison, a former president. I just think that looks bad for the country, is the way Donald Trump felt back then. Does he still feel that way right now? I don't know. I don't know if he regrets it or if he still feels that way, or if he had known how mercilessly they were going to go after him. But this is exactly what John Brennan is talking about. He is talking about a seditious coup. He is saying openly that Donald Trump is the president and the DOJ and the FBI work for him, and that the DOJ and the FBI is supposed to pursue anybody under the law, that nobody gets a benefit from a two-tier justice system. But Brennan is expecting to be covered by that same two-tier justice system. So yeah, sure, go ahead, open up an investigation, but just don't prosecute, right? I'm calling for you and the Department of Justice and the FBI to not do your jobs. As he lied about Russia. Again, December 8th, they knew Russia didn't interfere. December 9th, Brennan made up Russia under Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton.
Ready to continue to talk about the assessment and what we did during that period of time. There was absolutely no conspiracy, and we continue to stand behind what it is that we have said publicly.
But
yes, there was. And if there was a news like here on MSNBC, if they had a single journalistic bone in their body, you know what they would have brought up? They would have brought the reports that we did. December 8th, that Brennan knew that there was no Russian conspiracy. Or December 9th, when they made it up. And then when he himself pressured other people under him to go along with the same Russia hoax. I mean, this is Hunter Biden's laptop times 10. But of course, MSNBC, they're in the bag with the deep state. The reason that Brennan is on MSNBC is not because MSNBC is journalists. They're activists for the Democrat Party. So she's going to ask more softball questions, not be a journalist, to allow Brennan to lie to you more.
do you worry at all that the Trump loyalists who are installed in those key positions would find a way to punish you regardless of what the evidence reveals?
When we say that you will never hate mainstream media enough, I mean you will never hate mainstream media enough. The way she worded that, no matter where the evidence leads, because they lied to you for years about Russia. And they're not about to admit that they lied now. No more than they're about to admit how they covered for Joe Biden's mental decline forever. And then now they're pretending that the White House lied to them, like they weren't willing participants in it. See, this is the same cover that they ran before. Deep state over the mainstream media. So she's insinuating that there is no evidence that John Brennan did everything right, that everything was done by the book. And when these arrests, when they happen, assuming that they will happen, this is the cover that they're going to run. Is Donald Trump is persecuting his political opponents. That's the narrative that they're setting up right now. Do not doubt me for a second. That's the lead to this question. The mainstream media knows about these documents just like we do, but they're choosing to ignore them.
Well, I guess they're going to do what they were going to do, Anna. I just feel as though what we did was right. It was legitimate. It was based on our authorities and responsibilities. We would have been derelict if we didn't do these things. So again, I just like to think that, again, professionals in the Department of Justice and FBI and other places are not going to carry on this, what I think is an absurd effort to try to denigrate the work of intelligence professionals as well as the former leaders.
Degrade the work, not him. Because he's part of the liberal elite, right? He's part of the protected class. He is part of your betters. So he doesn't get held responsible for his actions. No, you do, you plebs. See, they only go after grandmas for praying in near abortions. Or they only go after people who went into the Capitol and did virtually nothing wrong. Or just for being on the ground. See, those are for you. Though the two-tier justice system is for the parents who dare to go to a school board and demand why they're reading a graphic literature to these underage kids. See, that's to the deep state. That's the threat to our democracy. That's where Chris Wray calls, right, domestic terrorists and white nationalism. But it's not for people like John Brennan, who get to lie according to these documents, right? His own documents. See, this isn't stuff that Donald Trump made up. This isn't stuff that came through from Donald Trump's administration. This is all back from Barack Hussein Obama's administration that was never supposed to be see the light of day. And that's what's going to sink these people if we actually have the DOJ do what they're supposed to do.
Speaking of intelligence professionals, NBC News spoke to the former CIA officer who helped oversee that 2017 assessment on Russian interference. And she bluntly says of the current administration, quote, the director of national intelligence and the White House are lying again. We definitely had the intel to show with high probability that the specific goal of the Russians was to get Trump elected. And she added that, you know, Putin and his friends in the Kremlin are probably, quote, toasting vodka shots as we speak at the turmoil this is creating. What are your thoughts on that? Is this all giving Putin...
Just a nice little softball from MSNBC. Isn't that so nice? Right, they're going to go to another expert, and then that expert who is lying gets to say the other side's lying, of course, without any evidence, right? Sources say, experts say, and then she takes that softball question right back to John Brennan so he can lie some more to you, the American people.
Even as the president seems to be souring on him a little bit?
I think it has, but what I'm most concerned about is the impact on the professionals within the CIA, within the intelligence community. This is not something that they deserve to have to deal with. For a current CIA director and a former director basically at odds with one another, I really hope that the leadership is not going to continue along this very political, partisan path in terms of defending Donald Trump.
Political, partisan path. How does he even look at them and say that? And why does MSNBC let him get away with it? Like the impeachment hoax number 1 didn't happen. The impeachment hoax number 2 didn't happen, right? Russia, which they're made up. The Gene Carroll, the 34 felonies. No, the DOJ and the FBI, they've never been political before, right? James Comey didn't take a box full of evidence against Hillary Clinton and say no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case. According to these documents from Barack Hussein Obama's own administration, that Brennan made all this up under the order of Barack Obama, and then Hillary Clinton played for it. With that, we're way over on our next break. We come back, we're going to get even more into this and how the media played a part in this, and then further deep down at how all these players, they all played their role. This is the deep state at work. You're seeing something that most never see. We'll be back to talk about that and a whole lot more after this brief greedy profit break. This is the CASHLOREN Show. We're spending it looks like the entire episode here on the Russia collusion hoax. And this is being Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton back in 2016 that they had decided that Hillary Clinton should have won that election. And then when they couldn't find anything that Donald Trump had done, they made up Russia, and now we have the receipts all these years later. So unfortunately, lies travel much faster than truth does quite often. The important date with Russia is December 8th. The reason why December 8th is so important is because that is the day that Barack Hussein Obama's own intelligence agencies came in with a report that said that Russia needed to have the means or the ability or the desire to interfere in our elections, meaning that they knew right from the get-go that Russia was a hoax. So instead of putting that in the presidential binder, and why this is also so important is because at this time, Donald Trump had already won the election, meaning that he had access to that binder, and he would have saw that Russia wasn't real, but that was gone and replaced with the one that they made up, saying that it was likely that Russia interfered in our election. They then ran that through the mainstream media. Mainstream media ran all their hoaxes, and then that went back to the Democrats. They ran their hoaxes, and then it went all the way back down to the FBI and the DOJ, back to the deep state, with the information that they made up themselves, and then they choose to open up investigations into the Donald Trump administration and put you, the American people, through years of hell and spent billions of dollars when they knew right from the get-go that it was fake. And they used like the Steele dossier when this was actually opposition research, and they used it as if it was credible intel to also go after Donald Trump and to get FISA warrants. I mean, you will never hate these people enough. At this point, there has to be arrests and there has to be prosecutions. I mean, this is real. If this is all proven in the court of law, we do all still consider everyone innocent until proven guilty, but the amount of information here is far more than enough for arrests and far more for investigations and far more for criminal referrals. We played earlier on John Brennan because he is the easiest out of all of them, because he is the one that openly stood in front of Congress and lied to them. And now we have the documents to prove it, meaning that he appears committed perjury to Congress. So he can be arrested for that if he did do so. And then that gets into what? Seditious conspiracy, possibly treason. What I expect is if they start arresting people, someone's going to sing. Right? Someone's not going to want to spend the rest of their life in prison. My money's on James Comey. I think he'd be the most likely, the quickest, that he'd be the one to want to make a deal. And we'll see how it goes. So this goes on to all the Russia, all the way up to now. These documents are coming out. And this is from the FBI, where they found these documents in these called bird bags and in this secret room. And who knows how much more is coming out between them and the intelligence agencies under Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I can't tell you enough how much risk she's taking to herself as she's actually holding the deep state accountable. Now we're going to find out just what kind of person Pam Bondi is, and Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, and especially Pam Bondi. Is she actually going to prosecute these people? We're going to find out very soon. As FBI Kash Patel, he says, Kash Patel, he goes, we uncovered this annex along with thousands of other documents buried in this back room of the FBI, meaning that he was never supposed to see them. Now, why were those documents still there in the first place? My guess is they ran out of time, so they hid him. I think that makes the most amount of sense. Is they did what they could do, assuming, right, that they committed crimes. As we put on the conspiracy hat for a minute, as this looks like this is what happened, right? Then that they did what they could to destroy these documents. And then when they couldn't destroy the rest of these documents, they hid them. I mean, that makes the most amount of sense. That Kash Patel and Dan Bongino were never, ever supposed to find these. And I'm sure as heck bet that they didn't think that Tulsi Gabbard would ever release the rest of the documents, proving that they knew Russia was a hoax. And now, not only they know it's a hoax, but now these documents prove that they were trying to frame Donald Trump for this hoax. And so he worked with Chairman Grassley to declassify these documents as soon as possible so the American people can see the truth. And these documents are all over the internet now. You can openly find them. You can print them yourselves. There's almost no redaction. And if according to these documents, it proves that Barack Hussein Obama and Hillary Clinton ordered Russia, right? According to these documents that the FBI and the DOJ is releasing. All of a sudden, the Democrats don't want to trust the experts. And something else that I find very suspicious is how that all of a sudden they were so interested in Epstein. I find that very strange too. Just the timing of it is suspicious. I mean, they had 4 years. Why do they waste their time with Russia? Why do they waste their time with impeachment hoaxes? Why do they waste their time with Gene Carroll and January 6th and the boxes hoaxes and suckers and losers and the 9 bullets hoaxes? Why did they waste all their time with that if they had the Epstein list? Unless, of course, that's another hoax, which I don't think all of Epstein is a hoax. I definitely think some very bad things happen there. They try to word this in a PG show way. And there's very, very likely to presume innocence that people did things that they should spend the rest of their lives in prison for with underage people. Now, what I do think is the hoax side is the side that they're trying to blame Donald Trump on, because of all that is they didn't go after him. It didn't get leaked to the press until right before all this stuff came out. So it seems very suspicious, like the deep state and the mainstream media that they're still trying to control the narrative and not have you looking at this, at the actual corruption, and not looking at Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and James Comey and John Brennan and Clapper and all the other corrupt officials. If this stuff is all, of course, accurate, presuming innocence. And Cash Patel goes on, this is a step towards justice. There will be more to come. Your FBI will be relentless to get the truth out. We're thankful for our partners. And as Tulsi Gabbard has also said, there is more coming out. And we have to put so much pressure on that there is no other choice but to prosecute. That the two-tiered justice system is dead. As Gabbard confirmed that the documents hidden in the burn bags prove a cover-up takes place, now it's time to arrest them. And then to jump on to the other side, this is the deep state working with the fake news media, is that they have what we call the Mockingbirds. This is also Tulsi Gabbard. And she was saying that the Project the Mockingbird is still happening. What Project Mockingbird, the brief version of what it was, is that this was the deep state working with the mainstream media, something that we thought had happened for a very long time. And now we know that it was. And that you had the deep state working with the mainstream media to put out the information they wanted to know. And now you had the other side of this, the Hillary Clinton and the Soros arm that were funding the back end of this to create all this hoax. And then you had the deep state that was making up documents and prosecuting. So it was the entire blob, the entire deep state, all working together. And go through this. So Obama leaders should be charged. So now this is going, and this is the Benny Johnson show today, where some like Matt Gaze was on there and some others, and Jack Sobek was talking about some more of the details of this case. And in their opinion, that this is a least seditious conspiracy. And I don't see how and why not. This could also be leading all the way up to treason. But it makes a lot of sense once you understand the deep state and who they are. As these unelected bureaucrats with their partners in the government and the elected officials being the government, that they think that they are born to rule over you. And that is their job to decide what is right and what is wrong. They decide morality. See, to them, government is God, not our Lord Savior, Jesus Christ. This is all about them having power over you. And the Constitution is in the way of that power. And so they've worked to erode it for decades. And they were so close. I mean, in 2020 to 2016, and all the way up to 2024, they were one election away from finishing their communist utopia, from finishing their communist revolution. But then Donald Trump got in the way. And now they're fighting as hard as they can, not to lose as much ground as they can. Just like as they blame their morality, they use this false sense of morality to frame Donald Trump for crimes he didn't commit. Russia, and all the other ones that they went after. Because they think that you shouldn't have voted for him. They think that they are the ones who are right. I mean, I can't overstate the way that they think about this. And the part of the reason why they think, we talked about how if we start arresting, that they will start to, someone will sing, and they think that it's because of some of the book passages in James Comey's book. And I think this is probably right. And one of them will, and it's probably James Comey, if these arrests start happening. And then Obama, and then Comey, and then Brennan, he is now on damage control, trying to pretend that they did nothing wrong. And mainstream media is ignoring all the evidence that has been released now. And then Matt Gaze, he went on to Ben Johnson show, and he said Obama-era officials like Brennan, Clapper, and Comey should be preparing for subpoenas and potential prison time for their roles in the Russia hoax. I hope prison time isn't potential. I hope it happens. Because he said the next thing's coming is subpoenas. And we're going to see who flips. Arrest him. And they did it to Donald Trump. Take the entire FBI and go kick down their door at 3 a.m. in the morning with weapons and lethal force authorized. Just like they did to Donald Trump. The FBI had no problem doing that to him. The FBI had no problem using way too much force to go into American citizens' houses and kicking down their doors in front of all their neighbors in a vastly overshow of force just because they dare to go to a school board and demand that school doesn't show their children inappropriate material. There's no reason for us to hold back. And with that, we're at the top of the hour. We're going to be doing something new now, is we're going to be going over to locals exclusively after the show. Is hopefully I got this all set up right today. We're going to continue on this story and many more, and you can join the conversation there. If you want to do so, head over to locals. I'll put a link to my page, and we'll be back tomorrow at the main show at 8 p.m. Eastern. This is the CASHLOREN Show. Well, independent thinkers, we have come to the top of another hour. The rest of the stories will have to go back in the stack. If you enjoyed this content, take a moment, hit the subscribe, turn on notifications. Most importantly, share a conservative message with your friends and family. We will be back Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern here on the CASHLOREN Show. We will go and we will expose and fight the fake news networks who have been getting away with lying to you for decades. Our content will always be free, but if you'd like to support more, you can do so monetarily over at locals at the CASHLOREN Show. And there's great rewards and benefits for doing so. For only about a cup of coffee a month, you will receive exclusive articles and you'll have your name at the end of the video, just like these other fine patriots have. If that sounds interesting to you, go over to locals right now for just a cup of coffee a month and help independent creators stay free, keep the lights on, and continue to expose the fake news networks. We'll see you again on the next episode. This is the CASHLOREN Show.